Hey, welcome back to Brighter Rays. And we're looking at a study called Love at First Sight. No, it's not. It's called For the Love of Rachel. Today we're looking at love at first sight between the two people here, between Rachel and Jacob. We're going to see their little love story blooming here. And we're looking at Genesis chapter 29, 9 through 12. So if you want to take a look at that for today, that's what we're going to be talking about. So let's start with Jacob. As Jacob is off talking to the shepherds, Rachel comes walking up with her father's sheep. It says that as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, he sprang into action. We might be tempted to attribute his response to an older man's infatuation with a beautiful young woman, but the rest of the story of Jacob would tell us otherwise. His love is real and strong from the very first meeting. He will speak lovingly, and his actions will be affected by his love for Rachel, decades after her death. This is an abiding love. We might be, if it's just as a momentary thing, like he's an older man, seeing a young woman. She's beautiful. She's, probably a strong woman. And he's naturally attracted to her. If that's all that happened, and we might chalk that up to affection, up to infatuation. But really, the love continues on. It doesn't just end here. And we see that in the end of Jacob's life, how he still has a love for Rachel. So it keeps going. It's not just a short momentary thing. So when Jacob sees Rachel with the sheep, he doesn't wait for anyone to move the stone, but he takes the opportunity to serve Rachel. He, in a show of strength, moves the stone from the well, does it all by himself, and then proceeds to water the flock of his uncle. He takes and waters the sheep. It's kind of the opposite side of what happened with Rebekah and the servant. Rebekah, watered the flocks. Here, Jacob waters the flocks. It's kind of interesting kind of turn of events here. So Jacob is willing to serve, really, Rachel and his uncle Laban right off the bat. Well, after the job is done, I'm guessing they were talking and stuff like that. While he's out there watering the sheep, it would take a while to water the flock, to get them in there and make sure they're all drinking and get them all set, ready to go for the rest of the day. But after he does this, after the job is done, he kisses Rachel and then he weeps with joy. He had to leave everything behind in Canaan, but now God has led him to a beautiful woman that was to be his wife. These are tears of happiness here. This is tears of joy. Jacob explains who he is and that he was Rebekah's son. And so before we look at Rachel, let's consider the kind of love that Jacob is displaying here. Now, one test of love is, does it cause a willingness to serve? This goes for our love of others as well, not just a romantic love, but it also has to do with the love of God too. This is something that we see in the love of God, the willingness to serve. That's what love is. So, let me quote to you from a guy named Charles Naylor. And he said, "The amount of our love to God is proved by our willingness to serve Him. If there is in us a disposition to do only what we please to do, and to disregard any of the known will of God, that's clear evidence that we do not love Him. It matters not what we profess. If we are not willing to put obedience to God's will before everything else, it is from the lack of love. There are duties for all. There are opportunities everywhere. Every one of them is a test for love. Brother, sister, how does your love stand the test? Love will not grumble. It will not complain. It will not shrink from service. Do you love as fervently as you ought?" That's a great question here. Jacob's love, the love that he has, that it's a love that's willing to serve. That's a good sign. That's one of the first signs that it is true love, not just some fake love. Now, God's love is a love of service, right? Jesus loved his people, and so what did he do? He served. He came to serve, not to be served. So that's what he did. That's the kind of love that God shows to his people. That's the kind of love that we need to show if we truly do love people. That's what real love is, a love to serve. A lot of the love in the world today is not a love of service, but a love of selfishness. You know, you need to love me. I'll love you if you love me, kind of thing, you know. It's not willing to really to serve. And so that's the big difference. Now, let's look at the character of Rachel. Now, Rachel's name means ewe lamb, which is a very fitting name for a shepherdess, right? Her name actually means ewe. So she is actually wandering around in the wilderness, out there on the fields with Rachel's. It's very funny. One wonders if she had an affinity for sheep as she's small, since, you know, that's what her name means. You know, did she receive her name because she liked sheep as a little kid? I don't know. It's kind of funny. But to name your child little girl sheep is kind of funny. But, well, like Rebekah, we can discern some things from Rachel from the stories of her life, too. We can kind of understand or kind of figure out who this woman is. Here we find her serving her father and the family by watching the sheep. She had to be a strong woman to do the job, right? Physically and mentally, emotionally strong woman. Her descendant David, when told that he couldn't fight Goliath, said that fighting the Philistine was no different from fighting off lions or bears that went after the sheep. That's what she's doing, right? She's out there protecting the sheep, watching over the sheep, just like her ancestor David would. So, she's got to be a strong woman, physically strong woman in her sense of, you know, being able to take care of herself, being able to, you know, emotionally control what's going on. So she's a tough girl. Besides caring for her father's sheep, when she is kissed by Jacob, she honors her father too. We're told that after Jacob explains who he is, she runs home, leaving Jacob behind, and tells her father. You know, she doesn't linger with the man, but runs to her father. Young women, you would do well to follow her example, right? If some guy comes up and is propositioning you, you should go tell your father. Get your father involved. You know, don't leave your dad out of it. Go talk to your father. Your dad has been given to you as a protection for you. You know, so some guy is asking, hey, you know, you're a beautiful woman. Let's get married. Let me go talk to my dad about that and see what he says about you. That's honoring your father. That's a good plan. That's a good idea. You know, your dad might refuse. I'm not saying you have to obey blindly, but it's a good idea to go honor your father in that way. It's honoring. You know, make your dad feel good. Like, okay, he cares about my opinion. She's honoring me in this. That's a good way to do it. So follow Rachel's example. Be a strong girl. You know, be out there doing what you need to do. But if some guy comes up to you and wants to, you know, get with you, then say, hey, I'm going to go talk to my dad about you. It's a good practice to do instead of just going with any guy who comes up to you. Let me tell you. So anyway, that's the lesson for today. So come back next time. We're going to look at verses 13 through 20. And we're going to look at how Jacob is disciplined for love, but he also disciplines himself for love. So come back next time.